Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. I'm your host today, Nathaniel Parent. I am so eager to introduce our guest, Audra Whatley, who is a licensed acupuncturist, a functional medicine practitioner, author, and a guide at the intersection of science, which I love this. This is such an interesting time we live in where the mysticism and the scientific conversations are happening. And you have a long experience of really bringing people into grounded spirituality. And you have the approach of the five bodies, Audra. And I think this is a really important discussion in this time because there's so much talk of woo-woo, which I still haven't gotten a clear definition of, and maybe that's the right word for it. But anyways, I'm looking forward to a beautiful conversation with you. I'd love to just invite you to tell us more about who you are, why you do what you do, and yeah, looking forward to it. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Um, so I- my background was actually hard science. I started in genetics and was a lab researcher. And I remember even in my undergraduate genetics program, it's like we got to that point where it was like, okay, so here I am looking at genetics, the building blocks of what it is to be human, at least according to science, right? And I was like, but all of that is just energy.
Mm,
And at, 18 or 19, however however old I was at the time, I just had this realization of like, I don't know what to do with that. Right.
mm,
And
mm,
so I graduated and kind of went about normal life and got a job and all of the stuff. And then I just had some really kind of traumatic life events happen, with, personal stuff. And I ended up in a situation where I was just kind of like, I don't want to live life this way anymore. And I made a choice that I was going to live my life in joy.
mm,
And in doing so, it's like I just started down this path of like following my curiosity. And my curiosity led me to, um, reading about and learning about traditions outside of the Christian religion that I'd been raised in. So it's like I started learning about paganism and Chinese philosophy and
mm.
Taoism and even some of the other Hindu traditions. And I just was really curious. And so I just kept learning all of these different things. And what came back to me is that they all had a very similar foundation. They
Mm,
were all saying very similar things, but in different ways. And that's kind of where I started. And in that period of time where things were really, really tough, I had some health challenges of my own. And I mean, it wasn't anything massive. I had a sinus infection that lasted
mm,
18 months. And I was on antibiotics every other month and
mm.
going down the path of breathing treatments and all sorts of other things. And I walked into a place like Whole Foods. It wasn't Whole Foods, but I walked into a store like that and I asked the guy, okay, medicine's not working for me. What herbs are possible? What else can I try? And so I went home with this bottle of herbs and I tried it and literally 3 days later, that sinus infection cleared up and it didn't come back for 6 months. I did it again and
Wow.
it went away in 3 days. And
Wow.
so at the time, I literally had my MCAT book studying to take medical tests to go to medical school and I put it away and I was like, what school can I find that has
Mm,
this magic herbal medicine? And it wasn't, I mean, really, it's like it wasn't anything magical, but to me at that moment it was because it worked so fabulously. And that's how I ended up in Chinese medicine school.
mm,
And from there, it's like I have always been curious. I've always been, I guess, what's called a seeker, looking for deeper understanding and deeper levels. I've been practicing acupuncture since I started my internship in 2001, so going on 25 years.
amazing.
And I am in a place of transition in my life where it's like I've loved being of service in the way I've been of service, but I want to be able to expand that reach further, and I can't do that in a brick and mortar.
Mm, mhm,
So I'm in
mhm.
that transition space right now.
That's amazing. And I certainly want to talk more about the community building that you've been doing. But before that, I think there's so much, richness in everything you shared, going from hard science, genetics and seeing, I mean, even from that level, there's such a reverence for the complexity of the body, but it's very material, right? It's very like mechanistic cause and effect rather than like energetic cause and effect. So what a deep insight to have at such a young age. And it's interesting that it brought you to traditions that are all rooted in these deep fields of science. I don't think we often realize from the Western mind like how deep the Vedic sciences are, how deep Chinese traditional medicine is, like how deep like a lot of these traditions have been, seeing the interconnection of the body from everything from like iridology to reflexology. I had a woman, I was at an event the other day and she was showing me some reflexology for migraines, which I have a history of. So I also had some painful things that led me into like meditation and finding, a pathway out of this. And it also led me to indigenous wellness. And when I've been on a few medicine walks, and it's amazing, you know, we mentioned like the woo woo kind of this time we're in, there's a lot of people that want that hard science. And it's really interesting concept like, emergent sciences like epigenetics, realizing like our consciousness is really is so vital to everything, but also there's consciousness in our environments around us. Like the plants have teachings, and it's to me it's interesting how the wool's been pulled over our eyes of society, and everyone we were told like everything's germs and genes and the only thing to deal with it is cut it out, medicate it or radiate it, and that's the solution, and it works, probably not most of the time, and it'll make you sicker in other ways. And so what a beautiful direct experience you had to alleviate you know some suffering in the body in such a natural way, and it does seem like magic, doesn't it?
It- I was gonna say I laugh because it's like I do like Marvel comic movies, and
Me
I want
too.
to say it was in the movie Thor that they were like he was like, oh yeah, that's it's not magic, it's just science you don't yet understand.
Yeah. Well,
And
I
I'm
mean,
like,
we're
yes, exactly. That is pretty much exactly what I'm saying, is that it's just science that we have yet to
Mhm.
understand.
So
And
true.
yeah, I mean, like I think. For me, it's been this whole teeter-totter balance of like being
Mm.
heavy science and then going really spiritual. I remember being in acupuncture school and somebody be sitting there talking about like um, lucid dreaming. And I had this moment where I was like, I was listening and I was listening to what they were saying. And I just had this moment where I was like, not everybody does that.
Mm.
And they just kind of looked at me really funny because they were like, no. And I was like, okay, well, I've kind of been doing that my whole life,
Mm.
so
Mm.
I didn't know. And I think a lot of it for me going into and learning, I guess what, like you said, like what people call the woo, was really just putting the pieces together of who I had always been. I was really fortunate. I grew up in a small town. We ran in the woods, we played in the
Mhm.
woods.
Mhm.
I would jokingly, my German Shepherd went everywhere with me, so I would
Mhm.
jokingly say I was raised by a German Shepherd.
That's awesome.
I would just be like, go home. And then I'd follow her home if I got lost in the woods, you know?
Mm.
But I always had this really deep connection with nature. And my dad was one of those people too that had a really deep
Mm.
connection with nature. So I already had this reverence and this feel for the expansiveness of nature and the expansiveness of being in the presence of
Mm.
mountains or out on the Gulf Coast or even out on the Gulf itself,
Mm.
and it just really being in that and knowing that there was more
Mhm.
to our environment than we ever gave credit to. And
Mm.
so it's like I had my mom she was a mathematician. She was one of those women that like got higher level, like graduate level mathematics degrees in the 60s when that just didn't exist. Women
Mhm.
didn't,
Mhm.
right? And so I had very logical on mom's side and very much more so the, survival, spiritual in some ways, but definitely not religious. I mean, so it's like I had both worlds. And so
Mhm.
for me, it was just finding language for the experiences I had already had and then building on that.
Mm.
That kind of brought me to where I am. And I feel like I probably went down a rabbit hole. So I'll
No,
let you.
no, it's all good. To me, like I've also been obsessed with how everything's interconnected, and to me, it's interesting. I met another community builder who is more focused on building better men, and he said something like, men we're hunters. We just forgot what we're hunting. But for me, I was always one of those, I was always had my side bag and like a sketchbook, and I spent a lot of time in nature, every mystical experience I've had, other than, well, even the natural birth of our daughter, it was in a washroom, but it still was like totally, that was every mystical experience I've had has been like deeply natural. It hasn't been from reading a book. The books help me gain perspective and understanding, but it's really, I feel like this is the adventure of life. But I realized when he said that, it's like, well, I've been hunting truth. Truth to me is always my North Star. I'm willing to be wrong. I don't need to be right. And yet I've had these direct personal experiences, like you having the herbal medicine that clears up your sinuses. Like, we all have these experiences, but I feel like we normalize them in a very compartmentalized society that's always focused on outward achievement or linear thinking that arrives at a destination. And really, if we look at the complexity of the human body, like just the I mean the microbiome alone, like we're barely understanding, like we walk around like it's just me, but it's like we're trillions of cells most of which is not even human DNA, somehow cooperating together, digesting food. We barely understand the process, and yet there are these really tangible ways that we can embody this wisdom and also bring it into the world in our unique way. And so this is where I'd like to just invite you to share more about this evolution that you've gone through, helping people directly for like 25 years doing acupuncture. I mean, all that stuff is really interesting to me, like the meridians and how everything's connected. But now looking at, scaling your unique purpose, which you have, this is one of the things that's always fascinated me about every individual, is like we all have such a unique purpose. We're not meant to, be a replica of someone else. We can learn from others, but really we all have a unique purpose. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about how you're expanding beyond the brick and mortar, Audra.
Yeah, so over the last 25 years of practice, I literally just sent out an email about this to my people the other day, which is kind of funny that this comes up. But over the last 25 years of practice, it's like what I have felt with like 90% of the people that walk through my door. In Chinese medicine, we feel pulse. And in their pulse, like most people had this nice rolling pulse, with the exception of what I associate with spleen and liver.
Mm,
And spleen has to do with digestive process. But when I think of digestive process, I'm not just thinking about microbiome and that part, even though it plays a part. It's how do we digest thoughts? How do we
mm,
digest our environment, like what we're receiving from our environment? How do we digest our life experiences? And then the other part was liver, and liver it's the most easily affected by stress.
mm,
And so most people go, oh, emotional stress. And I'm like, yes, but our environment is stressed.
mm,
Our pace is stressed.
mhm,
Like our air is stressed. Our water is stressed. Like everything around us is stressed, and we take that into our bodies on a daily basis.
mhm,
So literally, most everyone that walked through my door had this pattern of stress and inability to digest,
mhm,
even
mhm,
if their
mhm.
physical bodies weren't having digestive issues, or uh,
Interesting.
or even if they were like, no, I'm having a really good day, I don't feel stressed, right? So but the pattern would still be there underneath. And so it's like that's how I started putting
Mhm,
together the five body system that I worked with. Right. It's like, yes, we have this physical body. It has all of the stuff that goes with it. Most of us, there's no question that we have a physical body or we wouldn't be here. Right. And I believe, and I think most people have some belief that we have a soul, a spirit, or something that interacts with that.
mhm,
Between those two, there is our mind, which translates and thinks and does all of the
mhm,
stuff that the mind does,
mhm,
and our emotional body. I call
mhm,
these different bodies just because
mhm.
it's easier to think of in that way.
Of
So
course.
there's the spiritual body, the mental body or the mind body, and the emotional body. And the emotional body, I think of a lot like a communication matrix
Mm,
that picks up on things that are either in the subconscious or in the mind already, and
mm,
it transmits to our energetic or in the physical body. So that fourth body is the energetic body. Your second,
mhm,
they don't really have an order.
mm.
I talk about these as separate bodies because they have different characteristics. They have
Yeah,
different ways of working with them, but it's really more like ingredients of cake batter. It's
yeah,
like once you have cake batter, they're all mixed up and you really don't
of
see a
course.
difference because it's
Yeah.
just you, right? And
Well,
so
sorry, go ahead. Don't want to cut you off.
that's okay. So I was just gonna say that's how I think of the five different bodies. And I realized that it's like the more that we do our own investigation of those, it's like the more
Mm,
that we have tools to prompt us, the more that we have language to put to it, and the more that we do our own investigation, our own seeking into ourselves, it's like we kind of have a cooking process, right? And
mhm.
then once we are cooked into cake instead of cake batter, there's this emergence of a sixth body.
Mm,
I don't necessarily have a name for it, right? But it's like that's the work that I'm working on.
okay.
I have a plan for, and it's not out in the world yet, but I have a plan for creating an emergence program,
Okay.
and that's what I'm working on, just kind of in the background, and that will be available in my community
Okay.
um,
Wonderful.
when the time comes,
And
and
tell us
it'll.
more about your community.
So my community is called Betwixt, and I was trying to think like what's the good word to be like where I am, where a lot of people are, and I just really liked kind of the olden feel, but at the same time
Mm,
it's really modern. There's a lot of people that are kind of going with more magical stuff, and to me it's not magic. I mean, it's just the science we don't understand, but it's really about bringing together science and soul. I
mm,
am, and it's like the more that you listen to me, the more you'll be like, I really like the deep stuff.
mhm.
I don't want to work with surface level. There's tons of people doing surface level out there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Go do it. Find your language, find your curiosity, right? But
Yeah.
it's like if you've done all the stuff and you're still like, I'm trying to get to my next level, whatever that is. That's the stuff that I like to work with. I
Yeah.
like my stuff is really deep, and
Okay.
even in the base tier of my community and school, it's deep stuff, and people say that they're like, "Wow, you go really deep," you know. So.
I feel a kindred spirit with you, Audra, because I have always had a hard time being surface level, and I think what I'm learning is that like discernment is key because not everyone wants to go there. It actually can be very jarring for some people to even consider that their perception of reality is not the whole end all. You know, some of my own mystical experiences were simply that. It was like, oh, I'm not seeing all of reality, and I knew that intellectually, that we only see this visible spectrum and you get all the science, from a very materialistic, dogmatic point of view. But when you actually experience something miraculous or, have these deeper insights, and one of them, I think, collectively is really interesting. You mentioned emergence and, this idea, because we can all have different, perceptions, I feel, of what is true, but we certainly do have there is something that we are going through collectively in an emergent way as a collective consciousness on our planet. Different traditions speak of them differently. Whether there was all the fear mongering around like 2000, right? The what was it? Y2K. Everything's gonna shut down. It's over. And then there's like talk of the apocalypse 2012. And anyone who went deeper into that realizes apocalypse means transformation. It's the end of an era, an end of an age. And I've been to a lot of different indigenous ceremonies talking about different prophetic perspectives on it, whether it's like different names for different prophecies of what's happening. And I think there's an agreement if we look at the earth based spiritualities that we are in this time of great transformation. I think that the Vedic science is kind of like we're in a Kali Yuga, but this is a unique Kali Yuga where we have an opportunity to really awaken as a species. And what's possible for us, I think we simply can barely comprehend. I mean, Christ told us, "Well, you too can do these things and greater." Well, what does and greater mean? Because he did some phenomenal things that we haven't really seen anyone in our modern times exhibiting that level of the miraculous. Or maybe it's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. I don't know, but and I think that's part of his teaching. But where do you see this emergence unfolding, and how important is it to stay grounded in our spiritual purpose from your perspective?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm processing the way that you use the word so that I can answer it.
Sure.
So, um, when it comes to emergence, I really believe that it's more of like us recognizing ourselves
Mm,
as the spiritual beings that we are with the power that we have. I love that you brought in like that Jesus said that we have the same abilities, if not better. I think that one, it's been suppressed within us.
mm,
I think that so many of us were raised in a culture being told that our gifts, whatever they are, and everybody's are different, that our gifts were bad or wrong,
Hmm. Hmm.
that we
Hmm.
can't show up that way in the world. So a lot of the work that I do kind of foundationally is getting people back in touch with their own self. I mean, it's
Hmm.
like really getting back into, where is your authority? Your authority lies within yourself, not in, but we were taught from the time we were itty bitty, your parents
Hmm.
are the authority, your
Yeah.
teachers are the authority, your professors are the authority. Now there's authority in the fields that you're supposed to follow, and you're supposed to do things with the same protocols that they
Yeah.
did. So we're always told authority is out there and it's not within you.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, the first thing I do is like bring people back to their own authority within themselves
Hmm.
because you are the only authority on you, that is for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that doesn't matter if we're talking about advocating for yourself in the medical model, or if we're talking about like really from a spiritual perspective of learning how to mm, wield your own gifts, I guess,
Hmm.
is a way to say it,
Yeah.
because we're all very gifted in different ways. A very close friend of mine that I have been working with for probably, a decade at this point, um, she had had some memories of when she was a child and she was told that she couldn't do the things that she knew that she could, but she shut it down because of all of the stuff that she was told of, between religion and everything else, that was not okay.
Hmm.
And, over the last 10 years, she's just really stepped into being able to communicate with the earth, being able to communicate with the trees and the animals and all of the stuff around her. And she and her husband moved out onto like, 5 acres, and the things that she's able to do with the land. And it's like it sounds really magical, but it's like I want to pull it out of the world of magical thinking and
Hmm.
be like, no, no, really, you can have an impact in your environment and the way that things show up. Even if it's just like imagining putting an energetic bubble around you when you're in a really loud environment and being like, okay, this is my quiet space, and
Hmm.
being able to be in quiet space in the midst of chaos
Hmm. Hmm.
or whatever it is
What a
that you feel
skill.
like you need. We all have that ability. We all have those abilities, and everybody's is very individual. I feel like I probably went a little bit different than what you asked, but
No, not at all. No. Yeah, it's
um,
interesting.
yeah, where it's like with emergence, I completely believe that we are in a global emergence. And again, it's like kind of settling back into bringing the power back into yourself instead of
Hmm.
it being in governments, instead of it being in outside in industry and all of that, so that we have this really grounded, experiential power within ourselves. And that doesn't mean that, we go out there and be money magnets and all the stuff you hear with a lot of the, manifesting communities. And
Hmm.
not that I want to, poo-poo on that or anything like that, but I think those are great. But I think when you really get to the depths of things, most of us aren't craving more stuff, more money. We're
Hmm.
craving more connection. We're craving more. A lot of us are craving more of ourselves
Yeah.
because so many people don't even really know who they are outside of the identities of their job titles and their roles, the roles that they play in the world.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm sure you guys have talked about that before, of like really bringing it back to, if I'm not my roles, if I'm not my
Hmm.
job title, if I'm not all of my education, then who am I?
Yeah.
At some point, when you've asked who am I enough, you come down to, well, if I'm not a who, then what are we?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The what am I and who am I questions are very, very deep. And I think there's so much. I mean, I love this conversation because it's exactly the things that I contemplate on a regular basis in terms of so many of us want to have impact. And you mentioned a few things that I'd like to circle kind of back and bring into focus. So like this idea of manifestation, I think is really kind of at the forefront of a lot of like new age thinking. And I think it points to a need. Like we do need we're looking for something that will fulfill us. And for anyone who does that work, we know it's like, back to Neil Donald Walsh, it's be, do, have, and this idea that we need to feel, we're looking for a feeling state. So we know that. And then there's also more of the kind of the economic, like think and grow rich. I find that it's interesting because clearly they all point to the fact that we actually have this power within us. And I think an important distinction, and I got this from Christ's letters, is that when like the ego is the self that is drawn and part of what gives us the vehicle to experience who we really are. Like without an ego, we would not, feed ourselves, we would not get out of bed, we would not, have the drive to really do anything. So it's essential. However, it's not meant to drive the bus. And when we manifest from egoic nature, we can create a lot of chaos and harm to those around us because the ego is not concerned about its neighbors. It's not concerned about the environment. It's like, no, I just want it all for myself. And that can be like a natural outcome of a belief, right? That perception piece of like, well, the ego, if you identify as the ego, of course you like, well, I want it all, like give me the whole pizza instead of seeing like this is a party. We all want a slice of pizza. Like relax. There's infinite pizzas because we make them. Right. Um, and I'd like to circle this back to what you were saying earlier because pardon me, I think it's really important. You were saying that pulse that everyone came in with,
Hmm.
and there's this stress. It reminded me of actually, I was just reading in the letters yesterday how Christ was saying like he realized the impacts that his mind and emotions had on his environment when he went through the enlightenment process in the desert, and his human consciousness was totally cleansed. And he said, I realized that I was one man having one impact on my environment. He's like, what of whole cities that are everyone is in this state of stress, and what impacts does that have? And he talks about how that stress can go into the fault lines of our planet, where the geography is weaker, and it accumulates there, and it leads to all these natural disasters that are not really just as they're not natural to us, but they're a result of the stress that we put on the system and our own biology. So I find that really interesting. And what I'd like to ask you about is what do you think? Because you talked about digestion, how being in that stress state eliminates digestion. It seems like the real epidemic, to use that word, is what entrepreneurs talk about, what we all have to overcome to really be successful, whether that's embodied in our soulful self or successful in all ways. It's this idea of fear seems to be what that stress is like. That seems to be the ultimate dis-ease that we all have to face. And it's a challenge to face that, right? Because we're like biological beings. We're primed to stay safe. We're primed to stay in our comfort. Our nervous system is designed for that. It's almost like we have this fine this edge that we have to walk and be like, no, I'm going to face my fear. I'm going to return to equilibrium. But some people take that as like, I'm going to achieve like I'm gonna be the first quadrillionaire, and they get there, and then they're like, oh, this is not still not fulfilling me. I must own 17 planets or something. I don't know. Who knows what the future holds?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get that and I feel that. So what in all of that, what that brings me back to is in Chinese medicine, we talk about the five elements. And the
Mm,
five elements are similar but different from a lot of the native traditions. They have four elements and I'll come back around on that. But the five elements in Chinese medicine are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And each of those flowing in that order is actually a creative process.
mm,
So, water, which is associated with fear, is also like the turning within. It is introspection. It is the idea before we grow anything, right? It's
mm,
like that's what it is. And water feeds the wood, water feeds trees, right? Water feeds
mm,
plants. And tree or wood, the wood element is really about growth. It's like, how do we grow things? The emotion that goes with it a lot of times is anger, but it's also the suppression of emotion.
mm,
So it's like when you think about, that fear aspect from the water element, and it's like how that grows, how you grow is that you get out of fear and you move into this wood element, which is about growth.
mm,
And I think a lot of people, like you said, it's like they want to, they want to overgrow. They want to take over everything. Right? If you stay there too long, it's like I said, that can either become anger, or
mm,
it can get suppressed. So a lot of us out of fear, even when we start to grow, we start to suppress our emotions. We start to suppress what we think because we can't show up that way in the world or whatever it is. Well, wood feeds fire. That's the next
mm,
element.
mm,
Fire is, it's heart health and all of that that goes with heart and sleep and those good patterns. But the fire element is about joy. It's about
Mm,
community. It's about creating community. It's about
mm,
being in community. And I think a lot of us, we miss that. I'm growing, I'm growing, I'm growing. How do I do something with this?
mm,
And while we know we need to get in community, a lot of times we get into community, but we're suppressing who we are.
mm,
And I don't
mm.
mean you and me, but I'm just saying
Yeah, no, I get it. Yep.
as a culture, that's what we do. The
Yep.
next element is earth.
Mm,
Earth is that digestive process. It
mm,
is the microbiome. Like literally, if you were to look at what we are, the bacteria are the same bacteria that are in the earth. They're the ones that, help to develop our plants that we eat and all of the stuff, right? So earth is a very, um, mm, it's a very literally earth-bounded or ground or dirt, however you want to think of it, uh, sort of thing. And so that's where overthinking, overprocessing, worry, all of that tends to imbalance things.
mm,
And
mm,
from earth, we go into metal. A lot of people think of metal as harsh or over controlling, or, it's like a lot of times the metal personality gets, the people that are very uptight and they can't let go because they're controlling everything. But metal is really about grief. It's
mm,
about taking on the things that you've grown and that has blossomed and that you've collected the fruits from, and then letting things fall to the earth, letting things fall
mm,
away that no longer need to be with you. And then we
mm,
go right back into water to pull within, just like a plant would go through that same cycle. We go through those same cycles too. So
mm,
that is the evolution of whatever you're working on. And it does. It comes back to, okay, from here, do we create again or do we get into a state of fear?
mm,
Because that fear is what will deplete us. But like I said, five elements in Chinese medicine, they flow in that order. But when we get to a place where, like I was saying, with that wood element, where it's overgrown and people want to stay within themselves and it be all about themselves for too
mhm,
long, it skips over community and it goes straight into controlling
mm,
the earth element. So
mm,
it's like when you're
mm,
trying to control that earth element, it actually becomes depleting. From a physiological standpoint, it's like that's where wood over controlling on earth looks like heartburn, digestive stress,
mhm, mhm,
can be IBS, those types of health issues
mhm.
kind of can directly resemble like not getting out of that stress pattern of, like I said, the liver and the spleen or digestive system.
Super interesting. I see like as a cycle of refinement, right? And I can think of so many examples of, you know, worldly successful people that, this idea of they pressed through the growth really from maybe more anger or more fear, and then if they didn't like heal those relationships with those emotions, we hear in business like grow gone, this idea that you grow beyond yourself. And we all know that founders are basically the bottleneck of most organizations until it gets to a place where community is really healthy and someone's not carrying things alone. So it really feels like that whole cycle you described is very much about this our own journey that we go through as we refine ourselves. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, so I like to. My perception is we're all spiritual beings on our way home, whether we identify as that or not. That this all soul yearns to return to its essence, but I feel like there's a purpose in the individuating process, which is like it's a cyclical thing that we need to go through to maintain our or maybe even create our character, our unique gifts. Maybe it probably is very much a creative process instead of just a refining one that we're like choosing who we're becoming so that we can add more value to that joyful place of community. I mean, if we were all replicas of Jesus giving each other high fives, that'd kind of be weird.
Although long hair and flip-flops,
That might be the requirement. We'll see.
and I completely 100% agree with like I believe that we are spiritual beings that are having a human experience.
Mm,
That shift of being the observer of your life is one of the biggest shifts that will change how you experience everything. I know so
Yeah.
many people, it's like they identify as this physical being and they have, how many ever years we have on this planet and then it's done.
Hmm.
But it's like when you shift from, this is Earth school, we're here to play and learn and grow, and who knows what's after that, but we know there's something after that. I personally believe, and not everybody believes this. I don't expect everyone to believe this, but I feel like we kind of sat down before we came in to a human body and said, "Hey, what do you want to experience this time?" And we have this amazing community that we go, "I need you to do this for me. I know that's going to suck, but you get to be this person and I get to be this person. Isn't that going
Hmm.
to be a fun role to play?" You know?
Yeah. Well, this is pretty well documented in a lot of like scientific ways too. Like I'm thinking of many masters, many paths. Who's the author of that? But I mean, a lot of people have had near-death experiences, have reported this. It seemed Dr. Sumorto calls it the bus stop conversation we have before materialization. And I like so I'm gonna maybe offer an expansion of what you just said too, because I feel it's very true, and I feel like they're on even another level. I remember sitting in a circle with listening to some elders one time, and the interesting thing about being around an elder is they tell a lot of stories that are they don't tell you like the truth directly. Like if you just go around saying you are consciousness, okay, what is that? They'll tell a story that leads you to questioning your own perceptions of reality. And it actually, if they're effective, and to me, if they're a true elder that's done their inner work and are really in that grounded state of embodiment, they say, they share a story that literally elevates the consciousness and it makes it literally like raises the light in the room, the vibrational frequency of the room. And I remember having this insight listening to an elder one time, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" Yeah, like everyone, like I've heard a lot of people say we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and I think there's a lot of depth in that. And I just realized we're spiritual. This idea that we go to the spirit realm. That veil just totally collapsed in that moment. I realized, oh my goodness, this is the spirit realm. It's just a denser. It's just a denser realm within it, right? And who knows how dense it can get, but here we are on Earth. And I feel like that we're having a human experience is an important conversation that I'd like to keep. A big part of what we're doing with Later Vision is this conversation because to me, like the spirit names carries me is Ondakin. Aki means land, and the name that carries me means basically keeper of the land. So like a steward, right? And why is that important? Why is it important, like this idea of taking care of the land? Like if we're here, a lot of like new age thing, I've heard, I always got to say something. People say, "Oh, I'm just a meat suit." Like, I'm just here to use this thing, get out of Dodge. Well, maybe there's something more because if I think of and you would have specialist knowledge in this, Audra, the intelligence of the body is so beyond my personal consciousness. Like all the complexity of just even in one cell, like all the processes in a cell and growth and oh my goodness, it's like it's wild. So what if we're here in embodying these vessels and becoming more and more refined and masterful in our stewardship to actually affect the material evolution of this world? And what if she truly is our mother and we're actually helping her conscious ascension as part of this? It's like that's I mean that's real community, right? Like we're here and we're bringing in our unique essence and we're adding kind of colors and experiences that wouldn't have existed. So I think about that a lot. And yeah, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, no, that's actually brilliant. There's so much. So I'm like going, okay, which piece do I dive into first?
Yeah.
Um, so you could even really say in some ways that as physical bodies, we're still our spiritual self, but we are just slowed down so slow that the molecules have become so dense
Hmm.
that it's like we have this experience where we can reach out and touch things here on Earth, that we can,
Hmm.
literally interact with the physical. That being said, that these physical bodies are literally built from the the pieces, the parts, and the essence that is Earth. Like, and
Hmm.
so it's like we have this coming together of very esoteric, energetic space
I get you.
space stuff with Earth itself. And that's what we get to do as interaction. Kind of like earlier, I was talking about the physical body and the spiritual body and the
Yeah.
stuff that's in between.
Yeah.
And I think that we are the stuff that's in between as well, right? But that, we're Earth, and as the natives would have said, we're Earth and we're sky,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, the above, below, within part. Um, there's so much that I could go into with that. But there were some things I wanted to back up to. Um, what I love about the story you were telling about the elder and telling stories. So my experience is that each of the bodies has a language of its own. And the spiritual body speaks in stories because
Mm,
we don't have in our physical existence, we don't have language for the spiritual experience because we don't have a physical experience of it until the
mm,
story gives us a physical
mm,
experience of it. And so a lot of times when people are speaking the language of spirit, it comes out as very poetic, as very
mm,
storytelling, as very, like, oh, that's interesting. But what it does is it creates a shift in consciousness,
mm, mm.
right?
Yep.
Where so far, I mean, in science, we're trying so hard to put labels and, bring physical expression to where you can see, see, touch, categorize, label. But spirit doesn't do that. And
Mm.
so those of us that have spiritual businesses, and then you go to a marketing professional and they're like, well, we need the one thing that you come in with and the one thing you leave with.
Yeah, I
Right.
know.
And I'm like, does anyone go to church and go, I'm bringing my burdens, I'm going to walk out with,
Salvation.
can you put that in my hand? Because
Yeah.
yeah, right. So I think that there's this, um, part of our evolution is allowing there to be language and
Mm.
acceptance of language that isn't necessarily physiology and physical based.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that has become like the vein of my existence lately of like, yeah, I can't give you a what you come in with and what you leave with. I can't give you a one thing, the one thing that's going to shift. I can't give you the one thing you have to change because it's not one thing. It
Hmm.
is literally a shift in paradigm, a shift in experience. And like I said, the spirit and the spiritual language is going to give you a story to
Hmm.
help move you towards what that is. And so it's really beautiful the experience that you had. And it also brought me back to in Chinese medicine originally. So Chinese medicine as it's taught today started being written in books 2,500 years ago. I mean, we're talking like a little before or around the time that Jesus was doing his own seeker's adventure,
Hmm.
before he became whatever whatever he became in his lifetime that we then changed and categorized and made it whatever it is in religion now. But way back then, in the very beginning, they had burned all of the original books, and there was an emperor that was very generous that came in and he said, I want to know what the medicine of the royal families is so that we can categorize and catalog it and have it available for the people because the people are suffering.
Hmm.
And that's how the very beginning of Chinese medicine that we know
Interesting.
now came into being. And originally it was, earth in the middle and just the four elements, like
Hmm.
most of the other indigenous populations. I have a feeling that had the indigenous populations of Americas been allowed to develop another 100 or 200, 250 years, that they would have had a much deeper healing practice that would have been much more in alignment with
Hmm.
some of the things that we see through the Ayurvedic traditions and Chinese medicine and Chinese philosophy. Um, just because, like I said, it's all that is the one thing that is consistent across the board when you go back several thousand years is that all medicine was earth-based medicine.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And
I'd like to add to this because I feel like this is a really important conversation, and I would not to challenge, but I think that it's a paradigm that we have that these cultures are not continuing to evolve. Like one of my encounters with Joseph Pitawanakwat, who's a medicine teacher from Manitoulin Island, his elders gave him all the knowledge they have of plant medicines from that area. So all the indigenous names, which tell stories. Interestingly, we were talking about the story of the storytelling as a language of the spirit. And then they challenged him. He said, combine our indigenous plant-based knowledge with scientific knowledge of, all the chemical processes, the enzymatic processes, and he's very articulate in this. And I feel like, like there's scientists like Robin Wall Kimmerer who have brought a lot of different traditions into like one, some pretty condensed material. And I think that because I had the privilege of building and teaching a program in a entry level Indigenous pathways course called the Science of Interconnection, and what you said earlier about the science and not really having that language, I feel it's so fascinating because the challenge I had in this course was I had to basically compare and contrast Western science with indigenous sciences and ways of knowing. And there is this whole field of indigenous sciences that people wouldn't say, but it's through storytelling, it's through understanding relationships. A lot of things people might say, well, that's oversimplistic. Like the idea of Robert E. Atleo wrote this in Saywalk, is this idea that the scientific process for a lot of indigenous communities in the past was very experiential. And so what he uses as an example is like this idea that we have shared dreaming, coming back to dreams. Many people would go on vision quests in this particular West Coast culture. I think it was national. I forget the exact culture, but they would either go on vision quests or would have dreams, and they would bring their visions and dreams together, and that collective consensus would dictate their next step as a community or as a village, like whether it was going to hunt whales or something in a certain area, or go fishing in a certain thing, or set up certain, or move the village, whatever. They would come to consensus, and then their experiment was to do that thing, and then their result was, their findings, their hypothesis, essentially. So he reframed it all, and I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at science, because we've very much compartmentalized science, and I think that comes from like Aristotelian kind of thinking of everything fits in a neat little jar on the shelf. But what you said really brought something to mind, like science has kind of wrestled with its own story. It hasn't really, because a lot of its story comes from the grind it had to go through facing religious authorities. And it's the same like in China, I would imagine, especially with the change from Chinese, they've gone through cycles of like very benevolent emperors and very non-benevolent emperors. And I really don't think we have a full comprehension of the whole history of China. But so it's like there is this denial of a story. And I wonder if that's part of at the heart of what is why we've kind of become so removed from our natural ways of being and knowing who we are, Audrey. Anyway, some neurodivergent
No,
expansive thoughts
no,
for you.
it's beautiful. I'm right there with you. Um, and there's two things that I'll bring back just as simple points is that unfortunately, science, for the sake of science, for the sake of exploration, has been really limited.
Mhm.
Um, at the collegiate level, at the graduate college level, it's like there is still some exploration for the sake of exploration, but science beyond that level is all what can we do to make money, which is
Mhm.
really unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really unfortunate
Very
because
limiting.
it is because I mean it's like honestly, if we found a cure for cancer, no one would want it or it would be poo-pooed because it would literally destroy an entire industry,
Hmm.
billions of dollars in industry.
Yeah. And there's
And
several people in history who have found different cures. I know a lot of medicine people who have cured themselves of certain things just, with their plant knowledge. And like I feel like every cure already exists, but it's not monetizable. So yeah,
right,
even Linus
exactly.
Pauling in the 50s showed that high dosage of vitamin C could cure most cancer if you had intravenous vitamin C. Basically, and so it's probably a lack of vitamin C that could cause it. So, anyways, yes, I totally hear you. And I realize why this is so impoverished in the current kind of iteration of what we call science isn't really the exploration. So, yeah, sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't mean to cut you off, but
that's okay. I
passionate.
have one more point. So when it comes to that kind of science meeting the things that we're talking about in just like you were talking about with the indigenous populations or with, all of the stuff that we call woo. Here's where the disconnect is that even in Chinese medicine, we talk about qi. Qi being, originally, a lot of people kind of simplify it to the energy of the body or the energy of everything. But really, in the original text, qi was energy at the point of becoming matter, matter at the point of becoming energy. So
Mm.
that's everything, that's us, right? And that comes up to about right here. And then science says, okay, we're going to look at electrons, and electrons either act as a particle or as a
Wave.
energetic or a
Yeah.
wave, right? So we have particle wave physics, and it brings it up to right here. And
Mm.
so they're like this far apart, but the scientific community goes, well, we can't make that leap. And so there's this really fine veil between
Mm.
the energetics that we talk about with
Mm.
energetic medicine and chi and
Yeah.
moving things with energy and the science that comes up to right there, and it's like it just can't make that leap
Mm.
across what
Super
it
fascinating. I love that illustration. Yeah, so
like
true.
and
So
they're
true.
just right there. And I find it so fascinating. It's like science will say, yeah, no, none of that exists. I've even had over the years being an acupuncturist, it's like they'll come out with scientific articles that basically show that acupuncture will have like a 65% success rate with something. And they'll say, but we did placebo acupuncture and that had a 57% success rate. But, what they don't say is that Western medicine treatments that do the same whatever they do for it only has like a 35%. But the conclusion that they come to for Chinese medicine is that it must be placebo effect because sham acupuncture is almost as good as regular acupuncture. And I'm
Interesting.
like, and I'm like, okay, but here's the problem with sham acupuncture. When you're doing an energetic process and you're pressing on, touching, or putting anything near the point, or even if you miss the point a little
Hmm.
bit,
Hmm.
you're still having an effect on the body.
Yeah. And it's the
And
same with Reiki, right? Because this is like we're talking about an intelligence. It knows where to go. Like we don't have to be the controller. Like we're not that really the healers. We're like enabling the facilitation of that intelligent love to enter the body, whether it's through acupuncture work or any modality. That's my perspective, anyways.
or distance healing or mindset or any of the stuff that we talk about. It's like becoming the own master of your own energy in a way.
Yeah. I I feel like so I'd like to make this a little bit more pragmatic. I think the five bodies you talked about and also the five elements are really important. So for someone listening to this who maybe is feeling stuck in an area of their life, Audra, and would like join your community and kind of confront this depth that is bringing that space of awareness, like, oh, maybe I'm really limited in my thinking and open up, and that can be kind of overwhelming for some people. It can feel like Pandora's box, like like, what do you mean there's this and this? And I've been told this my whole life. I've been conditioned. What would you say are some like simple grounded practices to help someone really to see that cycle where they're at, maybe where they're stuck, and so that they can, and it's probably different for everyone, but maybe what are some principles that you find are helpful to help someone start to get more grounded in their body, opening their perception to maybe they are more than they thought they were.
Yeah, there's like 1,001 different ways.
Hence the depth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I would say as far as getting grounded, getting grounded itself, getting grounded in anytime that you feel like your mind is racing and all of this stuff, like literally it can be as simple, and I am sure you've heard Nathaniel say stuff like this. Go outside, step in the grass barefoot,
Mm,
put your hand on
mm,
a tree, take some
mm,
deep breaths, get really present to what do you feel in your body? What do you hear? What do you see directly in front of you? What do you smell?
mm,
Maybe even do you taste anything?
mm,
Because it's like getting really back in touch with the physical so that you are in this present moment right this second.
mhm,
A lot of times takes you out of it disrupts the pattern of um, everything that's out there that's going on that you have no control over,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because most of it isn't even impacting you in that moment. So
Yeah.
it's like getting back into the moment that is right now that's very physical.
Yeah.
It's like that is the first step. And then following your curiosity.
I love
You
that. Yeah.
It's like, to me, that is, and what catches your attention? Like, if something that I've said catches your attention, then yeah, great. Even if you don't come to me, it's like, go Google something
Hmm.
or look for it out there, see what you find. You're
Hmm.
gonna find lots of different things because not everyone says it or believes it in the same way.
Hmm.
Some people are following a textbook and some people went off the other end of the spectrum to something else.
Hmm.
We don't know, but it's like, follow your curiosity because that's
Yeah.
going to get you your answers. I can't give anyone their answers. All I can do is present information and take what works and leave the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would encourage anyone listening to this too to, do connect with Audra or someone that has direct experience, because I feel like so much of the risk that we have right now as we're going through this evolution in technological advancement and how it's so important that we raise consciousness. I really believe it's through our relationships, because you can, yeah, go on AI or go on Google, ask all these questions, you get answers and you'll get like, documented. But I feel like there is, like, you talk about embodied wisdom, and I'd like to share more about that because I feel like that is an intersection of story, it's an intersection of knowledge, it's an intersection of, many of us have invested a great deal of time, energy, money into learning modalities, to being of service. And I feel like there is a risk that we can create more apparent separation on our journey and our perception of that if we're always going to um, objective kind of understandings. I think we need to do our research, but I really do feel like those connections are very important. What would you say about that, Audra?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very easy for me to be like, follow your curiosity, go ask wherever, instead of bringing it into creating a relationship. And I really do appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, like somebody in my shoes, or I'm sure a lot of the people out there that are creating communities to bring this information in have spent decades, years, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education
Hmm. Hmm.
and just learning and growing. And so there's something to be said there. And much like, kind of even going back to your elder story, is like 30, 40 years of experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it is, on top of the wisdom and the knowledge and that piece. But so much of, like, even in my clinic, what I noticed is that yes, people came originally for something they wanted fixed, acupuncture helped with that, but then they stayed, and I have people that have come back for more than a decade, for what shifts in conversation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's like, even conversations like this, it's like something shifts.
Yeah. Conversation is an interesting word, right? Because in business we talk about conversions, right? But this idea that there's this exchange, and I feel like there's something much deeper when we have conversation, because if we're doing it well, I think we're really actively listening to the other to gain. I like to think of it as the law of the circle. And if we were all standing in a huge circle, all of creation, we're all standing around whatever in the center is the truth that connects us all, that probably is unnameable. It's an ineffable expression, but let's just put an object there. Let's say it's a feather, and that feather is a representation of truth. Well, if I can listen to Audra, who is, at a few, people away from me, and we're holding hands and we're listening, or we're just sitting and listening, well, I'm gonna get a different perspective from your talk, from your story, than I would if I just tried to say, well, that's the truth. No, no, it's just a circle. Well, I might be just looking at the stem, and you can see how long it is. And no, it's just this. It's just this one master. It's not the other. Everyone else is a false master. This is the only master that you can listen to. Otherwise, damnation. It's like, whoa, whoa. No, no, who am I to say? So I feel like that listening component is really important. And you know, you reminded me of, I haven't thought about this, and I don't even know the quote. I think it was from doing a course that I heard, but it was like it was a blessing. May you be covered in the dust of your teachers or your master. And it was this idea that the more time you actually spend with whoever your mentor, your elder, your teacher, your guide is, like we actually are, like as we travel, we're time travelers. We're letting go of aspects of us that fall into our environments, and we know that in our physical spaces we call it dust, and we look at it like, ah, it's gross. But I feel like there's like that embodied wisdom, just like our hair, we know carries memory, and there's memory in this world. There's memory in our soil, and so yeah, I thought you reminded me of that. I think it's a very beautiful way of seeing a teacher's relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in that, there's like 42 different directions I could go, and I love all of them, right? But one of the ones that I really want to bring back is the difference between yin and yang, masculine and feminine,
Mm,
right? It's like so much of our culture is conditioned that masculine means male and feminine means feminine, and I'm going to say
mm,
no. We
mm,
have both in all of us. We
mm,
both had a mother and father. We all had mothers and fathers. We all have the energy of the masculine and the feminine within us, and there's this dance of the masculine and feminine.
mhm,
The leadership model of the masculine is one stands in the middle and leads,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
The leadership model of the feminine is that we have circle, and within that circle, we all have perspective, and that perspective is shared. So
mhm,
it's as we shift to more of a balance in our culture. I am not a big fan of, divine feminine, women should be running the show.
mhm,
That doesn't work either because it's just the opposite of what we've got,
mhm,
right? But it's like as we step into the balance, it's like there will be situations where one needs to take the lead so that all can follow
mhm,
and create massive movement together. But how that's going to happen is that in community, we have conversations so that the conversation and the whole of the whole is elevated,
mhm,
right? And that's
mhm,
much more of the feminine energy. So it's like allowing that dance between the masculine and the feminine. It's like, okay, I'm here to be a steward of wise gifts.
mhm,
It's like, or I'm here to be a steward of resources, whatever that is. And sometimes that means leadership and in the traditional way of the masculine of being the one who's doing the talking or the leading. And but at the same time, it's like also really creating a space where um the leadership is actually the community itself.
yeah.
It's
So
like within
important.
everybody.
So important. And I feel like it's reflective of indigenous ways of knowing in a huge sense, like worldwide. I feel like that was at the heart of a lot of different ways of being. Like a lot of the democratic model that was, borrowed, that now is part of the United States, is this idea of like, democracy, that there is like we have a say in what happens, and we have representational leadership, not authoritarian leadership. But one of the significant portions that was missed was the circle that governed that who the leader would be was a council of grandmothers. I think
Mm.
I believe that was true for the six nations, right? So, um, and that's an important piece when we think of grandmothers, is like they've been through a lot. They carry that embodied wisdom. They also know, Jimmy has a little bit of an ego. He is a good fighter. So if we need to go to battle, Jimmy's good. But if things are a little bit too quiet and everyone's getting along, Jimmy might start some shit that we don't need. We don't need that. So we're gonna take Jimmy out of there and we're gonna put, Tom. Tom's way more balanced. Or Nancy. We'll put Nancy in, like it could be, and I feel like that's an important what you said. I've heard of multiple different perspectives, like Taoist perspectives. Mantak Chia talks about, a lot of the wars and stuff we see in our world is really from that imbalance. It's the yang trying to dominate the yin because it feels inadequate to fulfill the yin because it hasn't learned how to cultivate its essence. And so because there's a physicality to the yang energy, and the void of yin is eternal. It's like, well, the only way I can win is to suppress. And I thought that was interesting because that can happen in the microcosm of a family, but we can see it worldwide. And it does, to me, reflect some of the things I've thought about since I was a young boy, looking at how we treat the land. Like we don't really have this harmonious way of treating land. We don't ask a tree, "Hey, is it okay that we're gonna clear the land to make houses or make a railway?" We just go with chainsaws and cut everything down. And it often saddens me. Like I've been pathways here where I live in Ottawa, forests I've just gone and been in, and then they're like the train's coming through and they just clear it down, and there isn't any kind of reverence given to the people in that area who live there, and maybe these are important places that, we go. It's just kind of like it's just been commercialized.
Yeah, and you know, going back to, and we talked a little bit on this way earlier, but even bringing it back with the balance of yin and yang, it's like if we think of ourselves as a set of concentric circles where we are the center circle, right? So that imbalance of yin and yang starts within ourselves. It
Hmm.
starts with our conditioning, where just like you were saying, the yang is very much go, do, put yourself out there, be assertive, don't cry, all of the stuff that we were conditioned to as very small children. And it doesn't matter if you were male or female, but at the same time, boys had more of that, you have to suppress your emotions, which is your feminine, right? And where, girls were allowed to have emotions, but then they were considered weak because of them. Right. So it's like we all start with that imbalance within ourselves. And then that imbalance like spreads to the next concentric circle, which is the people closest to you. So it spreads within the household. And then from there, it spreads to community and then nation and then worldwide. Right. So it's like that imbalance. Yes, it's in our environment as far as like respect of our Mother Earth, which is considered the feminine,
Yeah.
but then
Well.
there's this over, I don't know, worship to a god that's outside of us,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is considered yang, right? So it's like we have this rebalancing that's happening across all of those concentric circles, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that you brought it up in the way that you did, because it's like, yes, it impacts the house, it impacts the neighborhood, the city, the everywhere, and
Mm.
it starts within us. And so really it's like bringing it back to how can I balance that masculine and feminine within myself? Where can
Mm.
I dig out those places that are conditioned to believe um, whatever it is, whether it has to do with gender or within yourself.
Mm. Yeah, and it's really interesting that it all comes back to collapsing within the individual, and it's really belief, right? It's perception. Back to what we were saying earlier, it's like if you perceive that the yang, because you have a belief that this outward entity is masculine, is superior to the yin because of the belief of that creation story, and that that the feminine is responsible for us getting kicked out of paradise, then that's a belief system, right? And it leads to this idea that some an element is superior to another, and then it can lead to that behavior. And I feel like we are really in this interesting time where so much of that healing, there's so much talk to from many different perspectives, whether it's like very scientifically, we're talking about like nervous system regulation, and then we're getting more in the borderline territory. We're talking like breath work, which people have transcendental experience, but then we can talk about all of those things. Then we get even a little bit more into what people might consider woo, which I find is hilarious to me, is gratitude, right? But we have all the science to show that gratitude actually does all these benefits physiologically. It regulates your heartbeat. It does wonders for your digestion, all these things. And it's like we're getting closer and closer to this space, Audra. So what do you think is going to be the linchpin that just like or hopefully it's like a melding. What do you think is required of us in terms of owning the importance of this awakening process as unique individuals that we are?
Yeah, there are so many things that play into that. I really feel like that AI has opened up something that in the next 5 to 10 years, if it's utilized in a way that actually brings human expansionness instead of just financial and more of the the outside of us, I
Yeah,
really think there's so much potential there to
yeah,
have impact for medicine, for consciousness, for everything, particularly for in the fields of science.
yeah.
I think that the science that's going to bridge that gap doesn't exist yet.
Hmm.
And that,
Interesting.
it's like, and I think that we still are trying to put new Newtonian concepts onto quantum physics. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like while they understand quantum physics, they're still trying to make quantum physics fit into a model that you can do with math in a quantum in a Newtonian kind of way. And so it's like there's something there that's missing in that physics model that, it's like they've been circling answers for, you know, probably 50 years at this point, at least 20 or 30.
So do you
And
have about 3 hours, Audra?
I know, right? I was looking at the clock too and going, yeah, we could probably do this at least 5 times over and
Sure.
still have more,
Well,
but
we are planning a coherence conference for our home circle for the solstice of this year. So I'd love to invite you to come and to explore more of this and share what you know. And I'm happy to have a further conversation if you have another 10, 15 minutes, because I think there's some real gold here if you want to dig into it a little bit.
I would love to. I
Okay,
mean, like I'm open to that. And sure.
sounds good. Well,
Sure.
it's interesting. Uh I won't go into the weeds of it, but so I was with an electrician yesterday, and he offered me to take on an apprenticeship role with him because I've been looking some supplemental income to keep what we're doing here growing. And as I learn, not always comfortably, the challenges and simplicities of entrepreneurship. But it's funny because I've done like a lot of different trades works, and I was doing some HVAC assistance when we were on the island, and I've met quite a few electricians, and this idea of electricity is very young, right? It's like direction, and in the letters he talks about this too, that the Father's divine consciousness is physically expressed as electricity. So you can imagine that the mother divine consciousness is expressed as magnetism. So I always like to ask electricians, I said, there's a lot of electricians out there, but there's no magneticians. And so maybe this is the science that is missing because, well, and there's so much depth and importance in this conversation because one of the things that science is kind of self-assuredness is like all the whole scientific method, which I think that we need to be real in that the scientific method is not all of science. Like science itself is a quest for truth, as far as I am seeing it. And it does because it comes from that story of repression of its own ideas. I mean, Galileo was like, condemned for saying that the Earth was in the center of the universe. Like, what a thought. I have this feeling that we're going to come back full circle and realize like we all are the center of the universe. But anyways, I think it might have even been proven mathematically, but who knows? Um, the idea that there is this whole other side of things that is um, imperceivable that we can't measure because the scientific method is based on what you can measure with senses. So yes, we've created all these devices that allow us to get finer and finer into how close we can see and how far we can see, but it's still based on what we can see, what we can measure in some way. And what if there is something that is beyond our senses, is beyond time, is beyond our senses? Then we have a conundrum because there's no devices that we can possibly create to penetrate that space. It's impossible. So we have to rely on subjectivity, which is interesting because we know scientifically that subjectivity actually affects the electrons, probability cloud expression and all this stuff. Like that's quantum physics, right? And so you can't put Newtonian physics on it, but science has already shown it. It's like, yeah, it's called the observer effect. But we're looking for objective science, which literally means a science devoid of subjectivity I mean, the etymology of objectivity is to throw away. So like we're not there. We're just it's objective. It doesn't exist with us there. It's a paradox in of itself. Science, so Western science is a paradox. That's my conclusion for today.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Um, yes, all the way from when we were talking about the wave particle theory, it's like they
Yep.
to everything that we do. Now here's what's really interesting, just as a really quick story, when you were talking about magnetism and electrical, that sort of stuff. So like I said, growing up in my household was very interesting. My father was an entrepreneur because of health conditions. He ended up selling his business and retiring by the time he was 40, which was amazing for him. But he had such a brilliant mind, but he didn't have the education to back it up.
Mm.
But in his mind, he had this whole idea for cars that were based on magnetism.
Mm,
that they ran off of the magnetic field. They were like, I guess what you would think of as hover cars, right? But
mhm,
they ran off of the tension of the magnetic field of the Earth.
mhm.
Like that was his kind of like
I think that's
dream
super possible.
project,
Yeah.
right? But my mom is the very much logical, sensical, very scientific, grounded. Like she's much more of the, if it doesn't have the structure and
Mhm.
the physicalness behind it, that she just couldn't grasp those sort of things. But she would measure out the angles to build just about anything, and then my dad would go build it because he could look at something and just
Interesting.
translate it into. So, like I said, it's those same dynamics that we see play out with relationships and everything else. That it's like you were saying that the energy when you're talking about being an electrician is the masculine, but then the receptacle is actually the feminine.
Hmm. 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 Yeah,
So,
totally.
I mean, it's fun to be in the conversation of everything shows the patterns. It's like when you start to see the patterns that are underneath, like multiple cultures, multiple languages,
Hmm.
multiple fields of everything from electrician to Chinese medicine. It's like that
Yeah.
there are correlations and underlying threads in all of it. That's the
Yeah,
fascinating part to
so
me.
true. And I think even to the simplest level, like I'm having a conscious experience of being in this digital space with you, this magic box that connects us in ways that we barely comprehend. Like, and you're having, it's funny because this
It's
is
like,
also where I feel like the other side doesn't meet the science, right? Because there is a reality. I've literally sat across from people who have like deep study into like I think it's Course in Miracles, and they've said like, "I'm the only one who's real. You're a figment of, you're an illusion." And I was like, very assumptive. How do you know? Like, how do you know this for sure? Like every messenger, there's an intelligence behind it. And so I got to challenge this belief in real time,